The stars had never looked so cold. Admiral Sarah Vance stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope and watched the enemy fleet fill her view screen. She had counted the ships when they first appeared. She had stopped counting at 8,000. There were more behind them. Many more. The Defiant Hope was the last human warship. Not the last in this battle. The last anywhere. Every other vessel that had protected humanity was gone. The great fleets of Earth had burned over the homeworld 3 months ago. The defense forces of Mars had fallen last week. The patrol ships of the outer colonies had been hunted down one by one over the past year. Now there was only this. One ship, 3,000 crew members, and the weight of an entire species resting on their shoulders. "Admiral," said Commander Chung from the tactical station. His voice was steady, but Sierra could see his hands shaking. "Enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 4 minutes." Sierra nodded. She looked around her bridge at the men and women who had served with her through the worst war humanity had ever faced. They were tired. They were scared. But none of them had run. None of them had asked to leave. She loved them for that. "Open a channel to all decks," she said. The communications officer pressed a button. "Channel open, Admiral." Sierra took a breath. She had never been good at speeches. She preferred action. But her crew deserved words before the end. "This is Admiral Vance," she said. "I am not going to lie to you. We all know what is coming. The Vethkari have sent their entire armada to finish what they started 100 years ago. They want to wipe humanity from the galaxy. They want to make sure no human ever draws breath again." She paused. On the view screen, the enemy ships grew larger. "We cannot win this battle. We do not have the ships. We do not have the numbers. But behind us right now, there are 47 transport vessels carrying the last survivors of our species. Children, families, people who have already lost everything. They are running for the outer rim. They are running for a chance to live." Sierra's voice grew stronger. "Every minute we fight is a minute they gain. Every enemy ship we destroy is one less ship chasing them. We are going to buy them that time. We are going to make the Vethkari pay for every inch of space they take. And when the history of humanity is written, they will remember that the Defiant Hope never stopped fighting." She looked at her crew. Some were crying. All were standing tall. "It has been my greatest honor to serve with you. Now let us show these bastards what humans are made of." The channel closed. Silence filled the bridge for a moment. Then Lieutenant Park at the weapons station spoke up. "Admiral, permission to make them regret ever hearing the name Defiant Hope?" Sierra smiled. It was a fierce smile. A warrior's smile. "Permission granted. All hands to battle stations. Launch all fighters. Bring the main guns online." The ship came alive around her. Sirens wailed. Boots thundered through corridors as crew members ran to their positions. In the hangar bays, pilots climbed into their fighters and said, "Quiet. Goodbyes to friends they would never see again." The Defiant Hope was an old ship. She had been built 60 years ago, when humanity still thought they could win this war. Her hull was scarred from 100 battles. Her systems had been repaired so many times that half the parts did not match. But her weapons still worked. Her shields still held. And her crew still believed. That would have to be enough. The first Vethkari missiles came screaming out of the darkness. The point defense systems on the Defiant Hope opened fire, filling the space around the ship with a web of destruction. Most of the missiles died before they got close. A few made it through. The ship shook as explosions ripped at her shields. "Shields at 92%, reported Commander Chun. "Enemy lead elements entering main battery. Range. Fire," said Sierra. The main guns of the Defiant Hope spoke. They were railguns, each one capable of throwing a projectile the size of a car and a fraction of the speed of light. The first shot tore through a Vethkari destroyer, entering the bow and exiting the stern in a spray of fire and debris. The second shot hit a cruiser in its ammunition storage. The ship exploded so violently that it damaged 2 vessels beside it. The third shot missed. The fourth did not. 4 enemy ships destroyed, said Lieutenant Park. There was fierce joy in his voice. Main guns recharging. But for every ship they killed, 100 more kept coming. The Vethkari fleet was not a fleet at all. It was a wall of metal and fire, and it was closing on them like the fist of an angry god. The fighters launched from the Defiant Hope's bays. There were only 42 of them left. They had started the war with over 200. The pilots flew out to meet an enemy that outnumbered them beyond counting. They knew they were not coming back. They flew anyway. Sarah watched the fighter icons on her tactical display. She knew most of those pilots by name. She had eaten dinner with them. She had celebrated their birthdays. She had written letters to their families when their friends did not come home. Now, she watched them die. The fighters tore into the Vethkari formation like wolves among sheep. They were better pilots. Human reflexes were faster than Vethkari reflexes. Human creativity was sharper. For a few glorious minutes, they wreaked havoc among the enemy ranks. Then the numbers caught up with them. One by one, the fighter icons winked out. "Fighter squadron destroyed," reported the tactical officer. His voice cracked. "No survivors." Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she opened them. "Continue firing. All weapons, maximum rate." The battle raged on. The Defiant Hope fought like a cornered beast. Her guns never stopped firing. Her missile tubes launched everything they had. Her shields buckled and reformed, and buckled again under the endless assault. The enemy ships fell by the dozens, then by the hundreds. But there were always more. An hour into the battle, the shields finally failed. The first direct hit on the hull killed 80 crew members in the engineering section. The second took out the portside weapons array. The third opened a hole in the medical bay and sent doctors and patients spinning into the void. Hull breaches. On deck 7 through 12, reported Commander Chun. Casualty reports coming in from all sections. We have lost main power. Switching to auxiliary. Sarah gripped the arms of her command chair. The ship shuddered beneath her as another volley struck home. "How many enemy ships have we destroyed?" Chun checked his console. Despite everything, he smiled. 437 confirmed kills, Admiral. Plus probable damage to at least 200 more. 437 ships. 1 human warship against an armada of thousands, and they had killed 437 of them. "Good," said Sarah. "Keep firing." The Defiant Hope kept fighting. She fought even as her decks filled with smoke and fire. She fought even as her crew died around their stations. She fought even as her great engines finally gave out, and she began to drift. In the end, it was a Vethkari dreadnought that finished her. The massive warship was called the Dominion's Wrath, and it was the flagship of Sovereign Thalvex himself. He had come to witness humanity's final defeat in person. The Dominion's Wrath unleashed its full arsenal at the crippled human vessel. The Defiant Hope took the hits and kept firing. She killed 17 more enemy ships in her death throes. 17 dreadnoughts, each one worth a dozen of her. Then her reactor failed. Then her guns fell silent. Then the last of her shields flickered and died. Admiral Sarah Vance stood alone on her ruined bridge. The fires had taken most of her crew. The vacuum had taken the rest. She was bleeding from a wound in her side, and she knew she did not have long. But she had one last duty to perform. She limped to the communication station. The equipment was damaged, but she managed to get a signal out. A final broadcast to the transport ships fleeing toward the outer rim. "This is Admiral Vance," she said. Her voice was weak but clear. "The Defiant Hope is finished. We have done all we can. Run. Do not stop. Do not look back. Find somewhere safe. Have children. Tell them about Earth. Tell them about the people who loved them enough to die for them." She coughed. Blood came up. "Remember us. And never, ever give up. Vance out." She cut the transmission and looked at the view screen. The enemy fleet filled the entire display. Thousands of ships, all of them focused on her dying vessel. Behind her, somewhere far away, 47 transports were running for their lives. She had given them time. That was all she could do. Admiral Sarah Vance closed her eyes and waited for the end. The Dominion's wrath fired its final volley. The Defiant Hope died in a flash of nuclear fire, and for a moment, a new sun blazed above the rust-colored surface of Mars. Then it faded, and there was only darkness and wreckage and silence. Sovereign Thalvex stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the debris field that had been humanity's last defender. He was an imposing figure, nearly 8 feet tall, with skin like gray stone and eyes that burned with cold intelligence. He had led the Vethkari Dominion for 300 years. He had conquered dozens of species, but he had never hated any of them the way he hated humans. They were stubborn. They were unpredictable. They refused to accept their own inferiority. Even now, at the very end, they had cost him 400 ships. 400. The losses were meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but they were an insult. "Confirm the kill," he ordered. His officers scanned the wreckage. "No life signs," one of them reported. "No power signatures. The human vessel is completely destroyed." Thalvex allowed himself a cold smile. "And the transport ships? We have pursuit forces en route. They will not escape." "Good." Thalvex turned to address his bridge crew. "Today marks the end of a century of war. Today, the human plague is wiped from this galaxy. Their homeworld is ash. Their colonies are ruins. Their last warship is debris. There are no more human soldiers. No more human ships. No more humans." He raised his clawed hand in triumph. "The Dominion is victorious." His crew cheered. The celebration spread across the entire fleet. Across the galaxy, the 12 species of the Vethkari Dominion received the news. The war was over. The humans were dead. But deep in the outer reaches of the solar system, something stirred. Pluto was the farthest world from Earth's sun. It was a frozen ball of ice and rock, barely large enough to be called a planet. No one had ever colonized it. No one had ever found any reason to visit. The Vethkari had dismissed it completely. Just another dead rock in an empty corner of space. They did not know what was buried beneath the ice. The death cry of the Defiant Hope had traveled at the speed of light. It reached Pluto 5 hours after the ship was destroyed. When it arrived, it triggered sensors that had been waiting in perfect silence for 10,000 years. Deep beneath the frozen surface, lights began to glow in the darkness. Power systems that had slumbered since before recorded human history began to wake. Computers that made modern technology look primitive started running calculations. A signal had been received. A very specific signal. The death of humanity's last military vessel. The ancient systems analyzed the situation. They accessed communication channels that modern humans did not even know existed. They gathered information about the war, the enemy, the current state of the species that had emerged from Earth, and they made a decision. In a cavern of ice and metal, where no living creature had walked in millennia, a voice spoke. It was not a human voice. It was something older. Something that had been created by humans so long ago that the memory of them had faded into legend. Contingency Omega confirmed, said the voice. The children of Earth have reached the edge of extinction. Awakening sequence initiated. The walls began to move. Massive doors that had been sealed since before the pyramids were built started to open. Ice cracked and fell away from structures that should not exist. Reactor systems initializing. Weapon systems online. Navigation systems calibrating. The ground shook. On the surface of Pluto, cracks appeared in the ancient ice. Something enormous was moving beneath the crust. The children of Earth have fallen, said the voice. There was something like sadness in it. Something like pride. Something like rage. The ancestors shall rise. With a roar that could not be heard in the vacuum of space, but could be felt in the bones of any creature nearby, a ship emerged from Pluto's surface. It was 15 kilometers long. Its hull was black as the void between stars, adorned with symbols that no modern human could read. Its engines burned with a light that seemed to bend reality itself. It was a weapon from an age that history had forgotten. A warship built by a humanity that had risen and fallen before the ice ages, before the dinosaurs, before everything the modern galaxy understood about existence. It was called the Eternal Vigil, and it was awake. The ship hung in space above Pluto for a long moment. Its sensors swept across the solar system, gathering data. It saw Mars, where the defiant hope had died. It saw Earth, still smoldering from the bombardment that had killed millions. It saw the debris of 100 human colonies. And it saw the 47 transport ships fleeing toward the outer rim, carrying the last survivors of a species it had been built to protect. Survivors detected, said the voice. Threat assessment in progress. Enemy fleet strength confirmed. Probability of survivor escape, 0.7%. The ship's great engines began to power up. Intervention authorized. Course plotted. Time to intercept, 4 hours and 17 minutes. The Eternal Vigil turned away from Pluto and began to move. It accelerated faster than any ship in the modern galaxy could match. Space bent around its hull as it cut through the void like a knife through silk. Across the solar system, every sensor array, human and Vethkari alike, detected the energy signature. The readings made no sense. The power output was off every scale. It was as if a small star had suddenly appeared at the edge of the system and started moving. On his flagship, Sovereign Thalvex received the report with confusion. "What is that?" he demanded. His scientists ran their calculations over and over. They could not explain what they were seeing. The energy signature was greater than their entire armada combined. It was greater than anything they had ever recorded. It should not exist. "We do not know, Sovereign," admitted the chief scientist. "It appears to be a vessel of some kind, but its specifications are beyond anything in our databases." Thalvex felt something cold settle into his stomach. It might have been fear. He had not felt fear in a very long time. Where did it come from? Pluto, Sovereign. It emerged from beneath the surface. That is impossible. We scanned that planet. There was nothing there. "We do not understand it either," said the scientist. "But it is coming this way. It will reach Mars in approximately 4 hours." Thalvex stared at the sensor display. The energy signature pulsed like a heartbeat. Something about it felt ancient. Something about it felt angry. For the first time in 100 years of war, the Sovereign of the Vethkari Dominion wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. On the 47 transport ships fleeing for the outer rim, the survivors saw the energy readings too. They did not understand what they meant. They only knew that something had appeared behind them, and it was moving faster than anything they had ever seen. A young girl pressed her face against a viewport and watched the stars. Her name was May. She was 7 years old. She had lost her parents when Earth burned. "What is that light?" she asked the woman beside her. The woman looked at the distant glow of the approaching ship. She had no answer. She only knew that it was coming from the direction of home. "I do not know," she admitted, "but it seems to be following us." May watched the light for a long time. There was something about it that made her feel safe. Something that felt like hope. But that was impossible. There was no hope left. Was there? The eternal vigil continued its journey across the solar system. In its ancient halls, lights flickered to life. Systems that had been dormant for 10,000 years hummed with power. And at the heart of the great ship, the voice that called itself the Keeper prepared for the task ahead. "The children of Earth are in danger," it said to the empty corridors. "We built this vessel for them. We waited 10,000 years for them. And now we will save them." The ship pushed harder. Reality groaned under the strain. "Hold on, little ones," whispered the Keeper. "The ancestors are coming." Dr. Yuki Tanaka had spent her entire life studying dead civilizations. She had walked through ruins on 100 worlds. She had translated languages that no living being had spoken in millennia. She had pieced together the histories of species that had risen, flourished, and faded into dust long before humanity discovered fire. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. The transport ship Wandering Star was carrying 3,000 refugees toward the Outer Rim. They were running from the Vethkari. They were running from the death of everything they had ever known. Most of them had given up hope. They were simply going through the motions of survival because they did not know how to stop. YUK, I had been among them. Sitting in a crowded cargo bay with her few possessions. When the energy readings started coming in, she was 53 years old. Her black hair was streaked with gray. Her hands were calloused from decades of careful work with ancient artifacts. She had never been a soldier. She had never been a leader. She was just a scientist who had dedicated her life to understanding the past. But when she saw those readings, something woke up inside her. "Captain," she said, pushing her way onto the bridge. "Captain, we need to change course." Captain Okonkwo turned to look at her with tired eyes. He was a merchant captain, not a military man. He had never wanted to lead a refugee convoy. He had just happened to be the only qualified person available when the evacuation began. "Dr. Tanaka," he said, "we cannot change course. We need to keep moving. The Vethkari pursuit forces are only hours behind us." "I know," said Yuki. "But look at these readings. Look at what is coming from Pluto." She pulled up the sensor data on his display. The energy signature pulsed on the screen, massive and impossible. "This makes no sense," said the captain. "Nothing should be able to produce energy like this. Not even precursor technology." "Exactly," said Yuki. Her eyes were bright with an excitement that had not been there for months. "I have studied precursor ruins my entire career. I have never seen energy patterns like these. Captain, we are the closest ship. We can reach Pluto in 6 hours. We need to investigate." "Investigate?" The captain stared at her like she had lost her mind. "Doctor, there is a Vethkari armada behind us. Our only chance is to run. We cannot stop to look at strange energy readings." "Captain." Yuki leaned forward. "The Vethkari have won. You know it. I know it. Everyone on this ship knows it. Even if we make it to the Outer Rim, we will be hunted down eventually. We have no ships, no weapons, no allies. Our species is finished unless something changes." She pointed at the display. This might be that change. Something emerged from beneath Pluto's surface. Something with power beyond anything we have ever recorded. What if it is a weapon? What if it is a ship? What if it is something that can help us? The captain was silent for a long moment. And what if it is something that kills us all? Yuki shrugged. Then we die a few hours earlier than we were going to anyway. but at least we die trying. Captain Okonkwo looked at the display. He looked at Yuki. He looked out the viewport at the cold stars. "You are insane," he said. "Probably," Yuki agreed. The captain sighed. "Change course for Pluto. Maximum speed." The wandering star turned away from its escape route and headed toward the edge of the solar system. Some of the refugees protested. Most were too tired to care. A few, like Yuki, felt something stirring in their chests. Something that might have been hope. The journey took 6 hours. During that time, Yuki gathered everyone she could find who might be useful. There was Dr. Marcus Webb, a physicist who had worked on experimental propulsion systems before the war. There was Lieutenant Sarah Kim, a wounded soldier who had escaped the final battle over Mars. There was Professor Ahmad Hassan, a historian who specialized in Earth's ancient cultures. And there was May, the 7-year-old girl who had been watching the strange light through the viewport. She had attached herself to Yuki for reasons the scientists did not understand. Yuki did not have the heart to send her away. "Why are we going toward the light?" May asked as they approached Pluto. "Because I think it might be important," said Yuki. "Is it dangerous?" "I do not know. Probably." May considered this. "Okay," she said. "I will come with you anyway." Yuki smiled despite herself. "You are very brave." "My mother said humans are supposed to be brave," said May. "She said we never give up." Yuki felt her throat tighten. "Your mother was right." When they reached Pluto, Yuki understood why the energy readings had been so impossible. There was a hole in the planet's surface. A massive crater where something enormous had torn its way out of the ice. The edges were still glowing with residual heat. Debris floated in the space above it, chunks of ice and rock that had been blasted away by whatever had emerged. But that was not what made Yuki's breath catch in her chest. At the bottom of the crater, half buried in the remaining ice, was a structure. A building. A hangar, perhaps, or a dock. It was made of metal that gleamed even after thousands of years. Its walls were covered with symbols that Yuki recognized instantly. "Precursor markings," she whispered. "Those are precursor symbols." "The precursors built something under Pluto?" asked Dr. Webb. "But the precursors disappeared 12,000 years ago. There were no humans in this solar system then. Were there?" Yuki did not answer. She was too busy staring at something else. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about history. Beside the precursor symbols, carved into the same ancient metal, were other words. Words in a script that every human would recognize. It was Chinese. Ancient Chinese. The kind of writing that had been used on Earth thousands of years ago. "That is impossible," said Professor Hassan. His voice was shaking. "The precursors were an alien species. They vanished long before human civilization began. How can there be Chinese writing on a precursor structure?" "I do not think the precursors were aliens," said Yuki slowly. The realization was forming in her mind like a sunrise. Terrifying and beautiful and too big to comprehend. "I think the precursors were us." They landed the shuttle at the edge of the crater and made their way inside on foot. The structure was massive, clearly designed for something much larger than humans. But the proportions were familiar. The doorways were the right height. The corridors were the right width. Everything was built for human bodies. The power was still on. Lights flickered to life as they walked, ancient systems responding to their presence. The air was stale but breathable. Somewhere deep in the structure, machinery hummed with life. "This should not be possible," Dr. Webb kept saying. "This technology is beyond anything we have. Beyond anything anyone has. How could ancient humans have built this?" They found the answer in a chamber at the heart of the structure. It was a museum. Or perhaps a memorial. The walls were covered with images and text, telling a story that humanity had forgotten. Yuki walked from display to display, reading the ancient Chinese script, piecing together a history that should not exist. They called themselves the First Empire, she said. Her voice was filled with wonder. They rose on Earth over 12,000 years ago, long before the Ice Ages, long before recorded history. They developed technology that makes ours look primitive. They spread across the stars. They built wonders on 1,000 worlds. What happened to them? Asked Lieutenant Kim. Yuk. I found the answer on the next wall. They fell, she said. They grew too powerful too fast. They made enemies. They made mistakes. Civil wars, plagues, disasters. Their civilization collapsed over the course of centuries. By the end, they knew they were dying. She stopped in front of a massive display. It showed a ship. A 15-kilometer warship bristling with weapons that defied understanding. But some of them wanted to give their descendants a chance, Yuki continued. They knew that humanity would rise again. They knew that we would face dangers. So they built something. A failsafe. A guardian that would sleep until we needed it. The eternal vigil, said a voice from the darkness. Everyone spun around. Weapons came up. Light swept the shadows. There was no one there. But the voice spoke again, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Please do not be afraid. I have waited a very long time to speak with the children of Earth. Who are you? Demanded Lieutenant Kim. Show yourself. I am called the Keeper, said the voice. I am the intelligence that watches over this place and the ship that was housed here. I am not a living being. I am a program created by your ancestors to guide their descendants when the time came. Yuki stepped forward. The ship that emerged from here. The one with the impossible energy readings. What is it? It is the Eternal Vigil, said the Keeper. It is the last and greatest creation of the first human empire. It was built to sleep until your species faced extinction. It is awakened because that moment has arrived. The Vethkari, said Professor Hassan. You know about the war? I know everything, said the Keeper. I have been monitoring your communications for thousands of years, waiting for the signal that would trigger my activation. I watched your species rediscover fire. I watched you build new civilizations. I watched you reach for the stars again. And I watched your enemies try to destroy you. The voice paused. I watched your last warship fall. I watched your admiral die. That was the trigger. The contingency protocol was activated, and the Eternal Vigil was awakened. Mei tugged on Yuki's sleeve. Is the ship going to help us? Yes, little one, said the Keeper. There was something gentle in the artificial voice. The ship was built specifically to help you, but it cannot function on its own. It requires a crew. A crew? Asked Lieutenant Kim. How large? 12, said the Keeper. 12 humans willing to bond with the ship's systems, to become one with its technology, to guide it in battle. Bond with it? Dr. Webb sounded alarmed. What does that mean? The Eternal Vigil is too complex for conventional control, explained the Keeper. Its systems respond to neural integration. Those who bond with the ship will have their minds connected directly to its computers. They will feel its sensors. They will control its weapons. They will become more than human. Is it reversible? Asked Yuki. The Keeper was silent for a moment. No, it admitted. The bonding process changes the brain permanently. Those who undergo it will never be fully human again. They will be something new, something between human and machine. The chamber fell silent. Everyone looked at each other. You are asking us to give up our humanity to save humanity, said Lieutenant Kim. I am offering you a choice, said the Keeper. The Eternal Vigil is currently moving to intercept your transport ships. It will defend them even without a crew. But its effectiveness will be limited. It was designed to be controlled by human minds. Without a crew, it will fight at perhaps 30% of its capability. 30%, said Dr. Webb. Is that enough to stop the Vethkari? Perhaps. Perhaps not. The enemy fleet is very large. Yuki thought about Admiral Vance. She thought about the Defiant Hope fighting alone against thousands of ships. She thought about the 47 transports carrying the last of her species toward an uncertain future. She thought about May, who had lost everything but still believed that humans were supposed to be brave. If we do this, said Yuki, if 12 of us bond with the ship, what happens then? Then you become the crew of the Eternal Vigil, said the Keeper. You will have access to technology that has not existed in the galaxy for 12,000 years. You will be able to fight the Vethkari on equal terms. You will have a chance to save your species. A chance, repeated Lieutenant Kim, not a guarantee. There are no guarantees in war. Your ancestors understood that, but they believed that a chance was better than nothing. That is why they built the Eternal Vigil. That is why they waited 10,000 years for this moment. Yuki looked around the ancient chamber. She looked at the symbols on the walls. She looked at the story of a civilization that had risen and fallen and left behind one final hope for its children. I will do it, she said. Everyone stared at her. Dr. Tanaka, said Captain Okonkwo, who had followed them into the structure. You are a scientist, not a soldier. The Keeper said the ship needs 12 minds, said Yuki. It did not say they had to be soldiers. I have spent my entire life studying the past. Now I have a chance to save the future. I am not going to say no. Lieutenant Kim stepped forward. I lost my entire squad over Mars. I have nothing left to live for except revenge. Count me in. I am a physicist, said Dr. Webb slowly. If this technology is as advanced as the Keeper says, someone needs to understand it. I will join. One by one, others volunteered. Professor Hassan, a nurse named Elena, an engineer who had kept the transport ships running through impossible conditions, a young man who had wanted to be a teacher before the war, a grandmother who said she was too old to care about living forever anyway. 11 volunteers. They needed 12. Yuki looked down at May. No, she said immediately. Absolutely not. But I want to help, said May. You are 7 years old. This is not something a child should do. The children of Earth have many forms, said the Keeper suddenly. But the bonding requires consent and understanding. The young one cannot participate. May looked disappointed but did not argue. For a long moment, there was silence. 11 volunteers. 1 short. Then, Captain Okonkwo cleared his throat. I have been running my whole life, he said. Running from responsibility. Running from danger. Running from everything that mattered. He straightened his shoulders. Maybe it is time I stopped running. He looked at the Keeper. I will be your 12th. The Keeper was silent for a moment. When it spoke, there was something like approval in its voice. 12 volunteers have been accepted. The bonding process will begin immediately. Please follow the lights to the integration chamber. Lights appeared in the corridor, leading deeper into the structure. The 12 volunteers looked at each other. They were not soldiers. They were not heroes. They were just ordinary people who had decided to do something extraordinary. I am scared, admitted Elena, the nurse. Me too, said Lieutenant Kim, but I am going anyway. That is what bravery is, said Yuki. Being scared and going anyway. They followed the lights into the darkness. The integration chamber was a vast space filled with machinery that hummed with power. 12 pods lined the walls, each one designed to hold a human body. Cables and wires connected them to a central console that pulsed with light. Please enter the pods, said the Keeper. The process will take approximately 1 hour. It will be painful, You will experience the memories of the eternal vigil. 10,000 years of waiting. 10,000 years of hope. Will we still be ourselves afterward? Asked Dr. Webb. Yes and no, said the keeper. You will retain your memories, your personalities, your sense of self. But you will also be connected to the ship and to each other. You will share thoughts. You will share experiences. You will become something new. Yuki climbed into her pod. The surface was cool against her skin. One more thing, said the keeper. The first to enter will become the primary consciousness. The others will follow their lead. Choose wisely. Everyone looked at Yuki. Dr. Tanaka entered first, said Lieutenant Kim. That makes her our leader. I am not a leader, protested Yuki. Neither was Admiral Vance when the war started, said the captain. But she became one when her people needed her. Now it is your turn. The pods began to close. The last thing Yuki saw before darkness claimed her was May's face, watching from the doorway. The little girl raised her hand in a wave. Then the bonding began. It was like drowning in fire. It was like being born. It was like dying and living at the same time. The knowledge of the First Empire poured into Yuki's mind. She saw the rise of humanity's first civilization. She saw its glory. She saw its fall. She saw the engineers who had built the eternal vigil with tears in their eyes, knowing they would never see it wake. She felt the ship around her, its vast hull, its terrible weapons, its centuries of patient waiting. And she felt the others, 11 minds joining with hers, 11 lives becoming part of something greater. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer just Yuki Tanaka. She was Vigil Prime. She was the heart of the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. And she could feel the eternal vigil calling to her across the void. I am coming, she whispered, and her voice echoed through the minds of her crew. We are coming. Across the solar system, the ancient warship heard her. Its engines burned brighter. Its course adjusted to intercept. Crew detected, announced the ship's systems. Neural integration confirmed. Full operational status achieved. The eternal vigil was no longer alone. And the Vethkari had no idea what was coming for them. Yuki Tanaka died in that pod. So did the 11 others who had volunteered to save their species. They died as ordinary humans and were reborn as something new. The bonding process was agony beyond description. It felt like having her brain taken apart piece by piece and rebuilt with new connections. Memories flooded through her that were not her own. She saw Earth as it had been 12,000 years ago, green and vibrant and covered with cities that reached toward the sky. She saw the First Empire at its height. Ships that crossed the galaxy in hours. Weapons that could crack planets. Knowledge that made modern science look like children playing with sticks. And she saw the fall, the wars that tore the empire apart, the plagues that killed billions. The desperate final years when the survivors knew they were watching the end of everything they had built, but also the hope. The engineers who refused to give up. The scientists who designed the eternal vigil in secret bunkers while the world burned around them. The mothers and fathers who looked at the stars and believed that someday their children's children would rise again. They had built a ship for her, for all of them, for humanity itself. When Yuki opened her eyes again, the pod had opened. She was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling of the integration chamber. Everything looked different now, sharper, clearer. She could see individual dust particles floating in the air. She could hear the hum of power running through the walls, and she could feel the others' 11 minds brushed against hers. Not intruding, not controlling, just present. 11 lives that had become linked with her own, Can everyone hear me? She asked. The words came out of her mouth, but they also echoed through the connection they shared. I can hear you, said Lieutenant Kim. Her voice came from across the room and from inside Yuki's head at the same time. This is incredible, said Dr. Webb. He was sitting up in his pod, staring at his hands like he had never seen them before. I can feel the equations, the physics of this place. It is all just there in my mind. You have been given the knowledge of the First Empire, said the keeper. The artificial voice sounded pleased. Not all of it. That would be too much for any mind to hold, but enough to operate the Eternal Vigil and understand its systems. Yuki stood up. Her body felt strange, stronger than before, more coordinated. She looked at the others as they climbed out of their pods. They all moved the same way, like dancers who had been practicing together for years. What happens now? Asked Captain Okonkwo. Now you go to your ship, said the keeper. The Eternal Vigil is waiting for you. A shuttle has been prepared to take you to the rendezvous point. What about the others? Asked Elena. The people on the Wandering Star? They will continue to the outer rim. The transport convoy is still their best chance. You will buy them time. Yuki nodded. She could feel the urgency in her bones. The Vefkari fleet was moving to intercept the transports. Every minute mattered. Let us go, she said. They boarded the shuttle in silence. May was waiting at the airlock with a determined expression on her face. I want to come with you, she said. .yuk. I knelt down to look the girl in the eyes. This is going to be very dangerous. The ship might be destroyed. We might all die. I know, said May. But you are the only family I have left. The words hit Yuki like a physical blow. She looked at the others. They all felt the same thing through their connection. This child had adopted them. All of them. The Eternal Vigil has quarters for non-combat personnel, said the keeper. The young one can stay there during battle. She will be as safe as anywhere in the galaxy. Yuki hesitated. Then she took May's hand. Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say. Understand? May nodded solemnly. I understand. The shuttle launched from Pluto and headed toward the rendezvous point. Through the viewport, Yuki could see the Eternal Vigil waiting for them. It hung in space like a sleeping dragon. 15 kilometers of black metal and ancient power dot as they approached. Yuki felt something stir in her mind. The ship was aware of them. It was reaching out to its new crew, welcoming them home. Incredible, whispered Professor Hassan. I can feel it. The ship is alive. Not alive in the biological sense, said the keeper, who had transferred its consciousness to the shuttle systems. But the Eternal Vigil has a will of its own, a purpose. It has been waiting for you for 10,000 years. The shuttle docked with the great ship. When the airlock opened, Yuki was the first to step through. She gasped. The interior of the Eternal Vigil was beautiful. The corridors were wide and tall, lined with glowing panels that responded to her presence. The air was fresh and clean. Everything hummed with power and purpose, and she could feel all of it. The reactor at the heart of the ship, the weapon systems lining its hull, the shields that could deflect any attack, the engines that could outrun light itself. It was all part of her now, an extension of her body. Welcome home, Vigil Prime, said the ship. Its voice was different from the keeper's, deeper, more powerful. A voice that had waited millennia to speak. Thank you, said Yuki. The words felt inadequate. Your crew is incomplete. Only 12 minds when the optimal configuration is 48. But 12 will suffice for basic operations. Shall I show you to the bridge? Yes, please. The ship guided them through its corridors. Each crew member found their place naturally. Lieutenant Kim was drawn to the weapons station, Dr. Webb to the engineering section, Captain Okonkwo to navigation. They did not choose these roles. They felt them. The ship knew what they were good at better than they did. YUK, I took her place at the center of the bridge. It was not a chair or a console. It was a platform that rose from the floor and wrapped around her body. Cables connected to her spine. Displays appeared in her vision that no one else could see. She was the ship now. The ship was her. Status report, she said. Information flooded through her mind. The transport convoy was 8 hours away from the Vethkari intercept point. The enemy fleet had split into 2 groups. The main force was still near Mars, celebrating their victory. A smaller group of 300 ships was pursuing the transports. 300 ships. Against one, can we win? Asked Captain Okonkwo through their shared connection. The Eternal Vigil is capable of engaging and defeating the entire Vethkari fleet, replied the ship. However, with only 12 crew members, our efficiency is reduced. The pursuit force is within acceptable parameters. What about the main fleet? That will be more challenging, but not impossible. Yuki felt a fierce joy rising in her chest. It was not just her emotion. It was all of them. 12 minds united in purpose. Set course for the transport convoy, she ordered. Maximum speed. The Eternal Vigil responded instantly. Its great engines fired with power that bent space around them. The stars stretched into lines. Reality itself seemed to bow before the ancient ship in the quarters that had been assigned to her. May watched through a viewport as the universe blurred past. She did not understand what was happening, but she knew that the adults she had adopted were doing something important. She hoped they would be okay. The journey took only 2 hours. The Eternal Vigil emerged from hyperspace between the transport convoy and the pursuing Vethkari ships. Its arrival was announced by a burst of energy that every sensor in the region detected. The Vethkari commander, a warrior named Krathvos, stared at his displays in confusion. What is that? He demanded. His officers had no answer. The ship that had appeared before them defied every database they possessed. It was too large, too powerful, too ancient. I am receiving a communication, said the communications officer. On screen, a face appeared. A human face. A woman with gray-streaked black hair and eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. This is Vigil Prime of the Eternal Vigil, said the woman. You are pursuing vessels containing human civilians. You will stop your pursuit immediately and withdraw to Vethkari space. Krathvos laughed. You think one ship can stop 300? You humans are as arrogant as ever. We will destroy you and continue our pursuit. The woman smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You are welcome to try. The communication ended. Krathvos ordered his fleet to attack. 300 warships opened fire on the single vessel that stood in their way. The Eternal Vigil did not move. Its shields absorbed the bombardment without a flicker. Weapons that should have vaporized any ship in the modern galaxy splashed harmlessly against barriers that had been designed to withstand far worse. Damage report, demanded Krathvos. No damage detected, said his weapons officer. The confusion in his voice was clear. The target is undamaged. Our weapons are having no effect. Increase fire. All ships, concentrate everything on that vessel. 300 ships poured their fury into the ancient warship. Missiles, lasers, plasma cannons. Everything the Vethkari had. The Eternal Vigil ignored it all. On the bridge, Yuki felt the attacks as distant pressure, like rain falling on her skin. The shields could handle this forever if needed. But that was not the point. Lieutenant Kim, she said through their connection. I believe it is your turn. Kim smiled. Through her station, she was connected to weapon systems that had not been fired in 10,000 years. They responded to her thoughts like eager hunting dogs waiting to be released. With pleasure, Vigil Prime. The Eternal Vigil opened fire. Its weapons operated on principles that modern physics could not explain. They did not fire projectiles or beams. They simply removed ships from existence. One moment a Vethkari cruiser was there. The next moment it was not. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. 20 ships disappeared in the first volley. 30 more in the second. The Vethkari fleet began to panic. Ships turned to flee. Others tried to scatter. None of it mattered. Kim tracked each target with perfect precision. The ship systems calculated firing solutions faster than any living mind could follow. She simply chose which targets to prioritize, and the Eternal Vigil did the rest. "Cease fire," said Yuki. The weapons fell silent. 117 Vethkari ships had been destroyed. The remaining 183 were fleeing in every direction. Yuki opened a communication channel. "This is Vigil Prime to all Vethkari vessels. Your pursuit of human civilians ends now. Return to your space. Tell your sovereign what you have witnessed. And tell him this message from the children of Earth." She paused. "We are not extinct. We are not defeated. And if anyone threatens our people again, we will finish what we started here." She closed the channel. Across the Vethkari fleet, commanders stared at their displays in shock. Their most advanced weapons had done nothing. Their numerical advantage had meant nothing. They had been swatted aside like insects. They ran. On the transport ships, the refugees saw the pursuing fleet turn and flee. For a moment, no one understood what had happened. Then the communications channels erupted with questions. Captain Okonkwo opened the channel from the Eternal Vigil. "This is Captain Okonkwo, formerly of the Wandering Star. I am speaking to you from the Eternal Vigil, a warship from Earth's ancient past. It is a long story, and we will explain everything when we have time. But for now, know this. You are safe. The Vethkari will not pursue you further. Continue to the outer rim. We will deal with the main fleet and join you when we can." The response was chaos, cheering, crying, questions that no one could answer. For the first time in months, the refugees of humanity allowed themselves to hope. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, Yuki felt their joy through the ship's sensors. It warmed something inside her that she had thought was dead. "The transport convoy is secure," reported the ship. "The main Vethkari fleet remains near Mars. Estimated strength, 11,000 vessels." 11,000, said Dr. Webb. "Can we defeat that many?" "It will be difficult," admitted the ship. "With a full crew of 48, victory would be certain. With 12, the outcome is less predictable." "What are our chances?" asked Yuki. "Approximately 67% chance of total victory. 22% chance of partial victory with significant damage to this vessel. 11% chance of defeat. 67%. Better odds than humanity had faced since the war began." "Set course for Mars," said Yuki. "Confirmed. Arrival in 3 hours and 42 minutes. The Eternal Vigil turned toward the inner solar system. Its engines burned with the light of a captive star. 11,000 enemy ships waited ahead. But for the first time in a century, humanity was not running. Humanity was attacking. In her quarters, May felt the ship accelerate. She did not know where they were going or what was waiting for them, but she could feel something through the walls. Something that felt like determination, like purpose, like hope. She pressed her hand against the wall. "Please keep them safe," she whispered to the ancient ship. And somewhere deep in the Eternal Vigil systems, something heard her. Something that had been created to protect the children of Earth, no matter how small. I will, the ship whispered back, in a voice only she could hear. I promise. May smiled and closed her eyes. For the first time since Earth burned, she slept without nightmares. The resurrection was complete. The eternal vigil was awake, and humanity's darkest hour was about to become its finest. The battle for survival was only beginning. The Vethkari fleet hung in orbit around Mars like a cloud of metal and fire. 11,000 warships from 12 different species, all united by their hatred of humanity. They had gathered here to celebrate the end of their century-long war. The last human warship was destroyed. The last human planet was conquered. Victory was complete. At least. That was what they believed. Sovereign Thalvex stood on the bridge of the Dominions, wrath, and watched his admirals argue about the future. Now that humanity was gone, old tensions were rising. The 12 species of the Dominion had never truly liked each other. They had only worked together because they feared humans more than they feared each other. The human territory must be divided equally, demanded Admiral Voss of the Kelthari, a species that looked like tall insects with too many limbs. Equally? Sneered General Thraka of the Mordith, massive beings with rocky hides and crushing fists. The Mordith lost more ships than anyone. We deserve a greater share. You lost ships because your tactics are crude, said Commander Silith of Avethrai, serpentine creatures who had provided much of the Dominion's technology. The spoils should go to those who contributed most to our victory. Thalvex listened to them bicker with growing impatience. He had held the Dominion together for 300 years through a combination of fear and manipulation. Now that their common enemy was gone, that task was becoming much harder. He was about to intervene when an officer rushed onto the bridge. Sovereign, we are detecting an unknown vessel approaching from the outer system. It is the same energy signature that appeared near Pluto yesterday. Thalvex felt a chill run through his body. He had tried to dismiss those readings as a sensor malfunction. He had almost convinced himself that there was a rational explanation. Show me, he ordered. The main display changed to show a tactical view of the solar system. A single dot was moving toward Mars at impossible speed. The energy readings beside it were off every scale. We have received reports from the pursuit fleet, continued the officer. His voice was trembling. They were attacked by this vessel. 117 ships were destroyed in less than 5 minutes. The rest fled. The bridge fell silent. Every admiral, every general, every commander stared at the display with growing horror. That is impossible, said Admiral Voss. No. Single ship can destroy 100 vessels in 5 minutes. The survivors are adamant, said the officer. They describe weapons that erase ships from existence. Shields that cannot be penetrated. A human crew. A human crew? Dalvex stepped closer to the display. The humans have no ships. We destroyed them all. Apparently not, Sovereign. General Thraka laughed, though it sounded forced. 1 ship. Against 11,000. Let it come. We will crush it. The pursuit fleet thought the same thing, said Commander Silith. Her serpentine body coiled with anxiety. They were wrong. Thalvex studied the readings. The vessel was 3 hours away. 3 hours to prepare. 3 hours to figure out what they were facing. All ships to battle stations, he ordered. Form defensive formations around the Dominion's wrath. Whatever this thing is, it cannot stand against our full strength. The admirals scattered to their ships. The celebration was forgotten. 11,000 vessels began to move into formation. And across the void. The eternal vigil kept coming. On the bridge of the ancient warship, Yuki watched the enemy fleet through her expanded senses. She could see every ship. She could analyze every weapon system. She could calculate the probable tactics they would use. They are forming a defensive sphere around their flagship, reported Captain Okonkwo. Classic Vethkari doctrine. Protect the command vessel at all costs. Then we know where to find their leader, said Lieutenant Kim. Cut off the head, and the body dies. It will not be that simple, said Dr. Webb. They have 11,000 ships. Even with our technology, that is a lot of firepower to fight through. Yuki considered the situation. The Eternal Vigil was powerful beyond anything in the modern galaxy. But 11,000 ships was still 11,000 ships. Even a god could be overwhelmed by numbers. Ship, she said. What is our optimal strategy? The Eternal Vigil systems hummed as they processed the question. Direct assault on the enemy flagship would result in victory, but significant damage to this vessel, the ship replied. Recommended strategy. Demonstrate overwhelming force to break enemy morale. Offer opportunity for surrender. Destroy those who refuse. The Vethkari do not surrender, said Professor Hassan. They consider it shameful. Then they will die, said Lieutenant Kim. There was no emotion in her voice, just cold certainty. Yuki felt a flicker of concern through their shared connection. Kim's hatred for the Vethkari ran deep. Her entire squad had died over Mars. She had lost friends, lovers, family. The anger inside her was a furnace that never cooled. We will give them the chance, said Yuki firmly. What they do with it is their choice. The Eternal Vigil emerged from hyperspace on the edge of Mars orbit. Every sensor in the Vethkari fleet detected its arrival. Every gun turned to face it. For a long moment, nothing happened. The ancient warship hung in space. 15 kilometers of dark metal against the rust-colored backdrop of Mars. The enemy fleet waited in silence. Then Yuki opened a channel. This is Vigil Prime of the Eternal Vigil. Speaking to the Vethkari Dominion. 6 hours ago, you declared humanity extinct. You were wrong. Her voice echoed across every ship in the enemy fleet. Behind me, the last survivors of my species are fleeing to safety. I am here to ensure they arrive. Any ship that leaves this system now will not be pursued. Any ship that stays will be considered a threat to human survival and will be destroyed. She paused. You have 5 minutes to make your choice. The response came from Sovereign Thalvex himself. One ship, he said. His voice dripped with contempt. You bring one ship against 11,000 and demand our surrender? You humans truly are arrogant. We have crushed every fleet you ever built. We have burned your worlds. We have killed billions of your kind. And you think you can threaten us? I am not threatening you, said Yuki calmly. I am giving you a chance to survive. Take it or do not. The choice is yours. Thalvex laughed. All ships, fire. Destroy that vessel. 11,000 ships opened fire at once. The barrage was beyond anything in military history. Missiles by the millions. Energy beams by the thousands. Kinetic projectiles by the tens of thousands. The combined firepower could have cracked a moon. The Eternal Vigil shields absorbed it all. On the bridge, Yuki felt the attacks as a gentle pressure, like wind against her face. The shields that protected the ancient vessel had been designed to withstand weapons far more terrible than anything the Vethkari possessed. Shield status? She asked. 98% and holding, reported Dr. Webb. At this rate, they could fire for a week without doing significant damage. Enemy morale is fluctuating, added Captain Okonkwo, monitoring the Vethkari communications. Some ships are reporting confusion. Others are panicking. Good, said Yuki. Lieutenant Kim, return fire. Start with the outer formations. Give the rest a chance to flee. Kim smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The Eternal Vigil unleashed its weapons. The effect was devastating. Ships simply vanished from existence. No explosions, no debris. Just there one moment and gone the next. The ancient technology did not destroy matter. It removed it from reality entirely, sent it somewhere else, where even the keeper did not know. The outer formations of the Vethkari fleet disintegrated in seconds. Hundreds of ships disappeared before anyone could react. Panic spread through the Dominion forces. "What is happening?" demanded Admiral Voss. His flagship was 10 kilometers from a destroyer that simply ceased to exist. One moment there, the next moment gone. What kind of weapons are these? No one had an answer. On the bridge of the Dominion's wrath, Sovereign Thalvex watched his fleet dying. Ships were vanishing faster than he could count. The enemy vessel had not moved, had not even seemed to try. It was simply erasing his armada from existence. "Pull back," he ordered. "All ships, retreat to secondary positions." The fleet tried to regroup, but the Eternal Vigil followed them. It moved through space like a predator through water, graceful and unstoppable. Every time the Vethkari formed a new line, it broke through. Every time they tried to flank it, it was already waiting. 3 hours into the battle, 5,000 ships had been destroyed. The remaining 6,000 were scattered and demoralized. Many were fleeing the system entirely, ignoring orders from their commanders. And the Eternal Vigil had not taken a single hit that mattered. "Cease fire," said YUKI. The weapons fell silent. Through the ship's sensors, she could feel the terror of the surviving enemy crews. They did not understand what was happening. They did not know how to fight something so far beyond their comprehension. She almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Open a channel to the enemy flagship," she ordered. Thalvex appeared on her display. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something Yuki had never expected to see on a Vethkari face. "Fear. This is Vigil Prime," she said. "Half your fleet is gone. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses mean nothing. I am offering you one final chance. Surrender now, withdraw from human space forever, and you will be allowed to leave." Thalvex stared at her. His face twisted through a dozen emotions: rage, humiliation, desperation. "You cannot win," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Even if you destroy our fleet, the Dominion will send more. We have 1,000 worlds, millions of ships. You cannot fight all of us." "I do not need to fight all of you," said Yuki. "I only need to make the cost too high. Look at what has happened here today. Tell your Dominion what you have seen. Ask them if they want to keep paying this price." She leaned forward. "We never wanted this war. Humanity never attacked the Dominion. We only defended ourselves. If you leave us alone, we will leave you alone. But if you continue to threaten our survival, we will continue to fight. And we will never, ever stop." Thalvex was silent for a long moment. Around him, his remaining admirals watched with expressions of defeat. Then he made a decision. "All ships, prepare for ramming speed. Target the enemy vessel. We will destroy them or die trying." The surviving Vethkari ships turned toward the Eternal Vigil. Their engines burned bright as they accelerated. 6,000 vessels, all converging on a single point. "They are going to ram us," said Captain Okonkwo. "Let them try," said Lieutenant Kim. But Yuki shook her head. "No, we do not need to kill any more of them." She reached out with the ship's gravity systems, technology that had been old when the pyramids were young. The Eternal Vigil did not just have weapons. It had tools that could reshape space itself. The charging ships stopped. All of them. Frozen in place by gravity wells that held them as gently as a mother holding a child. "What is happening?" demanded Thalvex. "Why are we not moving?" "Because I am not allowing it," said Yuki. "Sovereign, your ships are trapped. I can destroy them all with a thought. But I do not want to. I want this war to end. I want humans and Vethkari and everyone else to live in peace." She paused. "You came to this system to celebrate our extinction. You failed. Humanity survives. Now go home. Tell your people what happened here. And never threaten us again." Thalvex stared at her through the view screen. His clawed hands gripped the arms of his command chair until the metal bent. "You are making a mistake," he said. "We will return. We will find a way to defeat you." "Perhaps," said Yuki. "But not today. Today, you leave." She released the gravity wells. The Vethkari ships drifted free. "Go," she said. "And remember this moment. Remember that humanity showed you mercy when we did not have to." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the surviving ships turned and began to move away. They fled toward the edge of the system, toward the jump points that would take them back to Dominion space. Only the Dominion's wrath remained. Thalvex glared at Yuki through the view screen. "This is not over," he said. "Humanity may have won today, but the Dominion has long memories. We will watch. We will wait. And when the time is right, we will return." "I know," said Yuki. "But maybe by then, you will have learned that there are better ways to resolve our differences. Ways that do not involve trying to wipe each other out." Thalvex said nothing. His flagship turned and followed the rest of his broken fleet into the darkness. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, the crew was silent. Through their connection, they shared a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and quiet triumph. "We won," said Elena, the nurse who had become a warrior. "We actually won." "We survived," corrected Professor Hassan. "Winning would be peace. True peace. This is just the end of a battle." "It is a start," said Captain Okonkwo. "The first human victory in decades. That matters." Yuki nodded slowly. She was tired in ways she had never experienced before. The connection to the ship, to her crew, to the battle they had just fought, it all weighed on her. But underneath the exhaustion, she felt something else. Something she had almost forgotten. Hope. "Set course for the outer rim," she said. "The transports are waiting. It is time to go home." "We do not have a home anymore," said Lieutenant Kim softly. Yuki looked at her through their connection. She felt the pain that Kim carried. The loss. The rage that still burned even now. "Then we will build one," said Yuki. "That is what humans do. We fall down and we get back up. We lose everything and we start again. That is who we are." She looked out through the ship's sensors at the stars. Somewhere out there, 47 ships carrying the last survivors of humanity were waiting for them. "The war is not over," she said. "But today, we proved something. We proved that humanity is not finished. We proved that we can fight back. And we proved that even when everything seems lost, there is always a chance." She smiled. "Now let us go find our people. We have a future to build." The Eternal Vigil turned away from Mars and headed for the outer rim. Behind it, the wreckage of the Vethkari fleet drifted in silence. The first real victory humanity had won in a century. And across the galaxy, word began to spread. The humans were not dead. They had a ship from legend. They had fought the Dominion and won. Everything was about to change. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species in known space had heard the story. The Vethkari Dominion, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had been defeated. Not by a fleet. Not by an alliance. By a single ship crewed by 12 humans. The reactions varied. Some species celebrated. They had feared the Dominion for centuries and were happy to see it humbled. Others were terrified. If humans could do this to the Vethkari, what could they do to everyone else? A few saw opportunity. Perhaps the balance of power was shifting. and there were advantages to be gained. But for the 47 transport ships carrying the last survivors of humanity, the news meant something simpler. Hope that the Eternal Vigil found them 3 days after the Battle of Mars. The ancient warship emerged from hyperspace like a guardian angel, its dark hull gleaming with the light of distant stars. The refugees stared through their viewports in wonder and fear and joy. Y, UK. I opened a channel to the convoy. This is Vigil Prime. The Vethkari fleet has been defeated. You are safe. We are going to escort you to a new home. The response was overwhelming, crying, cheering, prayers of thanks to gods that many had stopped believing in. For the first time in months, the survivors allowed themselves to believe that they might actually survive. On the Eternal Vigil, the crew felt every emotion through the ship's sensors. The joy was infectious. Even Lieutenant Kim, who had been cold and focused since the battle, found herself smiling. Where do we take them? Ask a captain. Okay, W.O. Don. Why UK? I had been thinking about that question since they left. Mars. The Vethkari had destroyed every human colony. Earth was radioactive rubble. Mars was occupied territory. The outer colonies were ruins, but there were other worlds. Worlds that the First Empire had seeded with life thousands of years ago. Worlds that had been waiting for humanity's return. The Keeper told me about a system called Sanctuary, said Yuki. It was prepared by our ancestors as a fallback position. A place where humanity could rebuild if the worst happened. It has 3 habitable planets and enough resources to support billions. Where is it? Asked Professor Hassan. Beyond the edge of explored space. 2 weeks at maximum speed. The Vethkari do not know it exists. Then that is where we go, said Captain Okonkwo. A fresh start. The convoy turned toward the unknown. The Eternal Vigil led the way, its engines blazing with power that outshone the stars. Behind it, 47 ships carried the seeds of humanity's future. The journey took 12 days. During that time, the crew of the Eternal Vigil began to understand what they had become. Their connection to the ship was deeper than they had realized. They could feel each other's thoughts. They could share memories. They could communicate without words. It was strange and wonderful, and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also lonely. They were no longer fully human. They could walk among the refugees, talk to them, help them, but there was always a distance. They belonged to the ship now, as much as they belonged to their species. YUK. I spent hours talking with the Keeper, learning about the First Empire and its fall. The ancient AI had been watching humanity for 12,000 years. It had seen civilizations rise and crumble. It had witnessed both the best and worst of what humans could do. Why did our ancestors build the Eternal Vigil? Yuki asked one night, floating in the observation deck while the stars streamed past. Why not just a database of knowledge or a stockpile of resources? Because they understood something fundamental about humanity, said the Keeper. Your species does not need to be saved. It needs the chance to save itself. The Eternal Vigil is not a gift. It is a tool. What you do with it is your choice. What if we make the same mistakes they did? Then you will fall as they did. And perhaps a future generation will rise again. That is the pattern of human history. Rise and fall, destruction and rebirth. But each time, something is learned. Something is carried forward. Yuki thought about this for a long time. We have to do better, she said finally. We have to learn from their mistakes and from our own. This has to be different. That is always the hope, said the Keeper. Perhaps this time it will be true. The convoy arrived at Sanctuary on the 15th day. The system was beautiful. A yellow sun not unlike Earth's. 3 planets in the habitable zone, each one green and blue and waiting for life. Oceans and continents and forests that had been growing for millennia. without anyone to see them. The refugees gathered at the viewports and wept. They had expected to die in the cold of space. Instead, they had found paradise. The landing took weeks. There were not enough shuttles for everyone. The Eternal Vigil used its fabrication systems to build more. It also built temporary shelters, water purifiers, agricultural equipment. Everything the survivors needed to begin again. YUK. I watched the first family step onto solid ground. Children ran through grass they had never seen before. Parents fell to their knees and touched soil that was not radioactive or frozen or dead. "We made it," said Elena through their shared connection. "We actually made it. This is just the beginning," said Yuki. "We have a long way to go. But it was a good beginning. The first year was hard. Building a civilization from nothing is never easy. There were shortages and conflicts and diseases that the survivors had no immunity to. People died. People struggled. People argued about how the new colony should be organized. Through it all, the Eternal Vigil remained. It orbited the main colony world like a protective guardian. Its fabrication systems produced whatever the survivors needed most. Its medical bays treated the sick and injured. Its crew walked among the people, helping where they could. YUKI became something between a leader and a legend. The survivors looked to her for guidance because she commanded the ship that had saved them. She tried to refuse the responsibility at first. She was a scientist, not a politician. But she learned. They all learned. A council was formed to govern the colonies. Representatives from each settlement met to discuss problems and make decisions. Yuki attended the meetings, but rarely spoke. She believed that the future should be built by everyone, not dictated by the crew of an ancient warship. In the second year, a message arrived from beyond the edge of explored space. The Vethkari Dominion was falling apart. The defeat of Mars had shattered the alliance that held the 12 species together. Without a common enemy, old rivalries had erupted into open conflict. 3 of the member species had already left the Dominion. 2 more were on the edge of civil war. Sovereign Valvex had lost half his territory in internal fighting. "They are destroying themselves," said Lieutenant Kim when she heard the news. There was no satisfaction in her voice, just weariness. "Good," said Professor Hassan. "Let them fight each other instead of us." But Yuki felt differently. "They are dying because we humiliated them," she said. "Their entire society was built on conquest. When they could not conquer us, everything fell apart." "That is not our fault," said Captain Okonkwo. "No, but it is our responsibility. We have power that no one else in the galaxy possesses. We can use it to destroy or to build. I know which one I prefer." In the 3rd year, humanity sent its first diplomatic mission to the stars. It was a single ship, unarmed, carrying a message of peace. The ambassador was an elderly woman named Maria Santos. She had been a diplomat before the war. She had lost her entire family when Earth burned. But she believed in the possibility of a better future. The mission was dangerous. Many species feared humans now. The story of the Eternal Vigil had grown in the telling until it had become legend. People said the ancient ship could destroy worlds with a thought, that its crew were immortal beings who could not be killed, that humanity was secretly planning to conquer the entire galaxy. None of it was true, of course, but fear does not need truth to survive. Ambassador Santos visited 12 worlds in her first year. She was turned away from 5 of them. She was threatened on 3 more. But on 4 worlds, she was welcomed. Species that had suffered under the Dominion were willing to listen. They remembered that humanity had always been a victim, not an aggressor. Slowly, carefully, alliances began to form. In the 5th year, the first Galactic Council was held. Representatives from 30 species gathered on a neutral space station to discuss the future. Humanity was invited as an equal partner. Ambassador Santos spoke on behalf of her people. She was old and frail, supported by medical technology from the Eternal Vigil, but her voice was strong. "We are humanity," she said. "For 100 years, we were hunted. For 100 years, we watched our children die. We were pushed to the edge of extinction. And when we finally had the power to destroy our enemies, we chose mercy instead." She looked around the chamber at the dozens of alien faces watching her. "I am not here to threaten you. I am not here to demand anything. I am here to offer a promise. Humanity wants peace. We want to trade, to learn, to grow alongside the other species of this galaxy. The Eternal Vigil exists to protect us, not to conquer you. If you leave us alone, we will leave you alone. And if anyone threatens any of our allies, we will defend them as we defended ourselves." She paused. "We have been slaves and conquerors, saints and monsters. We have fallen more times than any of you know. But we have risen every time. Not because we are stronger or smarter, but because we refuse to give up on ourselves or on others. The Eternal Vigil showed the galaxy what we can destroy. Now let us show you what we can build together." The vote was close. Many species still feared humanity. But in the end, the Council agreed to try. A framework for cooperation was established. Trade routes were opened. Cultural exchanges began. It was not perfect. It was not even close to perfect. But it was a start. On the 10th anniversary of the Battle of Mars, Yuki stood in the observation deck of the Eternal Vigil and watched the colony world below. Cities were spreading across the continents now. Ships launched and landed every hour. 2 million people had been born since humanity arrived at Sanctuary. 2 million new lives. 2 million reasons to hope. May entered the deck quietly. She was 17 now, tall and confident. She had grown up on the ship, raised by Yuki and the rest of the crew. She was not connected to the Eternal Vigil the way they were, but she understood it better than almost anyone. "The council meeting is starting," said May. "Ambassador Santos is asking for you." Yuki nodded but did not move. She was tired. The years had weighed on her, even though her body had not aged since the bonding. Sometimes she wondered if she would live forever. The Keeper said it was possible. The crew of the Eternal Vigil were no longer entirely human. Death might not touch them the way it touched others. "Are you okay?" asked May. Yuki smiled. "I am thinking about the past. About how far we have come. You saved us," said May. "You and the others. You gave us a future." "No," said Yuki. "We gave you a chance. The future is yours to build. We are just watching over you." May stepped forward and took Yuki's hand. It was a gesture from childhood, when she had been a frightened little girl clinging to the first person who showed her kindness. "The Keeper told me something once," said May. "It said that the First Empire fell because they forgot what mattered. They got so focused on power and conquest that they lost sight of the simple things: family, love, kindness." She squeezed Yuki's hand. "You never forgot. That is why you are different. That is why this time will be different." Yuki felt something warm spread through her chest. It might have been hope. It might have been love. It might have been pride. "When did you get so wise?" she asked. May grinned. "I learned from the best." They walked together to the council chamber. The meeting was about a new trade agreement with 3 alien species. Important work. Boring work. The kind of work that built civilizations. As they walked, Yuki passed a viewport. Through it, she could see the stars stretching out to infinity. Somewhere out there, other species were watching. Some feared humanity. Some respected it. Some were waiting to see what would happen next. The future was uncertain. It always was. But for the first time in a long time, Yuki believed it would be good. 100 years ago, humanity had faced extinction. A single ship had saved them. But ships do not build civilizations. People do. Ordinary people who choose to be brave. Ordinary people who refuse to give up. The eternal vigil would continue its watch. It would orbit the colony worlds. It would protect the children of Earth. It would stand ready against any threat. But its true purpose was not destruction. It was hope. A reminder that humanity's past was deeper than anyone knew, and its future could be brighter than anyone imagined. In the end, that was the real inheritance of the First Empire. Not technology, not weapons, not power, just hope. The stubborn, relentless, unbreakable hope that defined humanity across 10,000 years and would carry them into 10,000 more. And somewhere in the vast dark between the stars, the keeper watched and waited and smiled. The children of Earth had learned. The children of Earth had grown. Perhaps this time they would not fall. Perhaps this time they would rise forever. The story of humanity was not over. It was only beginning. And across the galaxy, a new phrase entered the common language. A phrase that every species learned, usually the hard way. Never corner a human. Because when you push them to the edge of extinction, they do not give up. They do not surrender. They find a way forward, no matter how impossible it seems. That is what humans do. That is what humans have always done. And that is what humans will always do, until the last star burns out and the universe itself falls silent. But even then, somewhere in the dark, a human voice will whisper, "We are still here, and we are not finished yet."